unlocked and into the dark. Some things are better left unknown. And I'll never find you here, 'cause no one's ever Oh, what a widow, a peaceful spider. When the glass is clean, she's a sneaky hider. Hide the lies and the alibis. Oh, what a sinner. Is it in her? What's the truth in this riddle? Is love really just this simple? I can't seem to find my way in this world that never stays. What a widow, a peaceful spider. When the glass is clean, she's a sneaky hider. Hide the lies and the alibis. What a sinner. Is it in her? Is this real? Just illusion? I'm lost in a wonderland of confusion. I'm lost in a wonderland of confusion. Is this real or just illusion? Manifestation or a dark delusion? Is this real or just illusion? I'm lost in a wonderland of confusion.
This is Cynthia Sue Larson with Reality Shifters and the International Mandela Effect Conference, and you're now listening to Dark Wolf's Den Show on Ripon Common Sense Radio.
Hello.
Introducing
Lasers.
Hello.
This station is now the ultimate power in the universe.
This is your man Meta, aka Propagate This Light, and you're now listening to Dark Wolf's Den.
Are ghosts real?
We had 1,000 hours of continuous communication with the spirit world.
Does time travel actually exist?
The laws of physics seem to be compatible with time machines.
You know, sometimes I wonder about reincarnation. Don't you?
A 4-year-old boy in Adelaide, Australia, has told his parents that he used to be Britain's Princess Diana.
What would happen if the world found out that aliens were real?
I didn't say disclosure would be easy, but what is the alternative?
To establish a space force as the sixth branch of the armed forces.
We have so many questions and yet so little time, so to have you here, the pleasure is all mine.
Coming to you from a secret mountain cave, hidden deep within the Idaho wilderness, this is the Dark Wolf's Den Show. Now, here is your host, Jerry Hicks.
That's right, I am Jerry Hicks, also known as the Dark Wolf, and welcome back to another episode of the Dark Wolf's Den Show. Whether you're on the edge of reality, the edge of the galaxy, or the edge of your seat, we're glad you chose us to be right there with you. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight is Thursday, November 19th, 2020, and tonight we're talking about EVP. That's right, the electronic voice phenomenon found in a lot of ghost hunting case files. So sit back, relax, grab a cold drink and a warm blanket, and curl up to another episode of the Dark Wolf's Den Show for November 19th, 2020. But first, today in history. On this day in 1863, U.S. President Abraham Lincoln delivers his Gettysburg Address, beginning with 7 years ago. When he finished giving this address, the entire crowd took in a collective breath of awe until the Secretary of State at the time stood and said, "We have just listened to a speech that will live through the ages." And that, ladies and gentlemen, could not stand more true. We still today know the words 7 years ago, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is today's Today in History. Truly an iconic speech. I wonder if he came back as a ghost, if he could give that speech as an EVP, right? Ladies and gentlemen, we are talking tonight about electronic voice phenomenon and or EVP. And this is where you're ghost hunting, right? You've got a recording device and you're listening around and suddenly you start asking questions but you don't hear no answer. And then you play the recording back and there is an answer there that was not audible when you were asking the questions. This has happened quite a bit, and there's actually a major distinction between EVPs and other phenomena, which we'll get to in just a moment. But in order to discuss this, we've got to bring in an expert. I always like to bring in the experts when it comes to topics, as you guys know. And this is no different, guys. You've heard him in a lot of the Ghosts series we did back about a month ago. Ladies and gentlemen, Grant Wilson.
A lot of investigators tend to focus on visual evidence. They're hoping to catch that one piece of evidence that will convince the whole world of the afterlife. But my favorite type of evidence is audio evidence, EVPs.
And of course, on any ghost investigation, it's a lot easier to get audio proof than it is physical proof most of the time.
Why? Because you get so much more information from an EVP than you do from video. For me, it is the most useful investigative tool.
And that I have to agree with. In all the years I have studied the ghost phenomenon, the EVPs have been the most consistent thing across all case files. Like, you don't always get a physical photo, you don't always get any other kind of evidence, but 9 times out of 10 you will usually walk away with minimum an EVP.
Remember, my goal is to help people, not prove the existence of the afterlife. So what I am after is information that I can use to help people, both alive and dead.
And EVP has become such an overused word amongst investigators because they've almost got to where they'll call pretty much anything an EVP. Check this out.
What qualifies as an EVP and what doesn't? I've said it before and I'll say it again. EVP stands for electronic voice phenomena. It's when you capture a voice or a noise on an electronic device that wasn't present at the time it was captured.
At least wasn't audibly present at the time that it was captured.
Despite the hundreds of times I've replayed the clip of me explaining what an EVP is on Ghost Hunters, people have gotten into the habit of using the term to describe any and all paranormal audio. But that's not how it works. If you're investigating and you hear a noise with your ears, or you hear a noise with your ears and you record it, that's a disembodied voice, not an EVP.
I'm going to go ahead and replay that last section because I think it's very important to make the distinction between an EVP and a disembodied voice or other phenomenon.
If you're investigating and you hear a noise with your ears, or you hear a noise with your ears and you record it, that's a disembodied voice, not an EVP.
So, lesson number 1, not every bit of audio recorded on an investigation is an EVP. If the audio is heard by the ones around while it's being recorded, that does not count as electronic voice phenomenon. Because the electronic voice phenomenon is just that. It's the idea that spirit or ghosts manipulate the electronic signal in order to communicate into this world. If you hear it around you, clearly they didn't manipulate any electronic signal in order to make the noise around you.
Now, voices that are detected through electronic equipment and heard in real time, that's technically an EVP.
So as long as you're hearing it through the electronic equipment only and not audibly around you at the same time, that still does count. But a lot of people have really gotten, like I said, to where they overuse this term a lot.
Some people even use the term EVP to describe the equipment itself. Did you bring the EVP? Or, hey, I caught it on EVP. Or, you want to do an EVP? Or, whoa, I got attacked by an EVP.
At least with an EVP, it would only be a verbal attack, right? But seriously, there is a science behind EVPs, even to the point that they have their own classification system.
A lot of people talk about the classification of EVPs, using classes A through D, even G and R sometimes, to define the quality of the EVP. With the A side of the spectrum meaning crystal clear, moving on down to D, G, and R, which basically classifies it as garbage.
So the more garbled the EVP or the less information that you can get out of the EVP, the lower on the scale that this would rank. Of course, listening to audio as clear as you're listening to me right now would be an A, whereas hearing maybe a word, maybe two, and a bunch of static, and only being able to barely make those out, that would be something like a G or an R, way down the scale.
I don't have a problem with these classifications, but there aren't really any standards. For me, there are two classifications of EVPs, discernible or not.
Which honestly is a lot more clear when it comes to EVPs, because that is a yes or no thing. Either you can garner information from it, or it's a bunch of garbled data, one of the two.
After just a touch of filtering, if you can't make out what the voice is saying, it's considered indiscernible and not useful.
And a lot of the EVP that I've heard has been very garbled, very staticky, and sometimes it comes down to just one's interpretation, because I can't count the times that I've heard and then all of a sudden somebody says, oh, that says grandfather, and they play it again, I hear something like that, or the priming aspect. So we must be really, really careful when replaying EVPs to make sure we don't prime each other or hear what we want to hear. With that said, they are some of the best pieces of evidence that we have to go on amongst the ghost and spirit phenomenon.
Here are just some of the reasons why I put so much focus into EVPs while investigating.
Do tell, Mr. Grant.
First off, catching a voice when one isn't present is significant evidence in and of itself that something strange is going on.
And I definitely have to agree with that. If you can catch an electronic voice phenomenon when there's no one else in the room but you, then that's a pretty good piece of evidence that there's something strange happening in your neighborhood.
Secondly, if that voice correctly and consistently answers questions intelligently, that's a second layer of validation.
And you remember last month in the Ghost series, we talked about the different types of hauntings. an interactive opposed to a non-interactive. Of course, this would have to be an interactive haunting, and EVP would definitely be a physical interaction, just like me sitting here talking to you on the radio right now, a physical interaction. It's just the same. It's somebody from the other side trying to talk back and forth to this side. Again, it's no different. They're the same person. They just don't have the skin on.
Thirdly, that voice can offer me so much information. I can learn so much more from the entity than the answers it is providing me to the questions I'm asking.
And that's true too. There's a lot of information that can be garnered, or evidence that can be garnered, just out of one or two words from a EVP phenomenon.
By the tone of the voice alone, I can potentially infer age, gender, nationality, emotional state, time period, and more. Based on the type of responses you get, an EVP can tell me if I'm dealing with an intelligent human haunting, a residual haunting, or something else.
And what's better is once you have the information like the time period, gender, things like that, and you can match it up to records of the area at the time, that really adds more fuel to the fire of the investigation for sure. But also you've got the fact that he mentioned the residual haunting, and I guess if you caught an EVP at the same time of the same thing being said over and over and over, I guess that would kind of qualify as a residual EVP. I never thought about it being a residual EVP. In my opinion, the only ones you could get was an intelligent haunting EVP, because it will actually interact with you, but I guess a residual wouldn't be much different, just replaying over and over and over. Again, an EVP would be able to determine that, because if it's the same over and over and over, we know it's a stone tape or a non-intelligent haunting, opposed to a regular haunting, which would answer questions and things like that in real time.
I've even used EVPs to help demonstrate that someone wasn't schizophrenic.
Now, that's really cool. When you can use EVP to back up someone and let them know that they are not crazy, and you can actually capture what they're hearing on an EVP recorder, then yeah, that definitely is really cool. That lets somebody know that they haven't lost their minds.
One of the effects of schizophrenia is hearing voices in your head. I had the woman write down on a piece of paper quietly what the voices were saying in her head. Separately, I was able to catch those same phrases in different voices on EVP. Hey, I caught it on EVP! Wild, right? I love this field.
It really makes you wonder now, doesn't it? You must be thinking back of every time somebody has told you, I hear voices, or I thought I heard something. They very well may have heard a voice, and it very well may not have been in their own head.
EVPs contain so much more intimate information than what you get on video. Exactly the type of information I need to help people. Plus, with audio, the funnel to catch the evidence is wider. You don't need to have it necessarily pointed in the right direction, like you do with video.
Which is another great point. With video, just like any video, you have to have it pointed right at the entity and hope like heck that it shows on the video. But with an EVP, or the electronic voice phenomenon recorder, I should say, I'm just as bad about misusing that word as everybody else is. But with an EVP recorder, you can determine, more information, because you've got all the air and sound frequency, if that's what it is, or even the electronics, can be manipulated more easily from a 360-degree angle, if you will, opposed to a straight-on linear, right in front of the camera deal, like he was saying it. Instead of having to be right in front of the camera where you can see it, you can catch an audio in pretty much anywhere around the air.
But like anything else, you have to be careful here to avoid contamination.
We'll get into that here shortly.
As said before, EVPs are so important. For example, one case we did back before the show involved a woman that was living in a house in New York City. Her family had lived there for 3 generations. Down in the basement, we kept getting an EVP of the name Beatrice. We asked the homeowner who Beatrice was, and she had no idea. She contacted her mother, and her mother didn't know.
And like I said before, if you can match up a name to a location in history, and those two pieces of evidence come together, then there's a really good chance that it is a haunting situation going on. But when you can't find any evidence to back up the EVP, well, kind of left a little head scratching, right? Well, that's what you would think. However, upon further digging,
the mother suggested contacting the grandmother in a home. The response from the grandmother was, "Where did you hear that name?" She told us to head upstairs, knock a hole in the wall, and we'd find our answers. I'm all about knocking holes in walls, so we got permission, went up there, and busted a hole in the wall. Fortunately, we didn't find Beatrice in the wall.
Oh, thank goodness.
What we did find was a leather-bound journal. This journal was kept by the client's grandfather, who was involved in organized crime back in the day. There he kept a list of all his misdeeds to get it off his chest.
Now, how could Grant have even known that there was a journal or anything behind the wall at all, or even where to go look, what level to look on, whatever the case may be? How did Grant have this information on anything besides the name Beatrice on an EVP that meant something to the grandmother? So, once again, as an outsider coming in, he was able to find this journal that the grandmother knew was there, but there would have been no mention of it ever if the name Beatrice had not come up on an EVP recording.
As we looked through the journal, we started seeing the name Beatrice. Beatrice was the name of this guy's mistress. Well, he got her pregnant, and she was gonna squeal, so he had his goons put her in a pit in the basement and cement it over. Well, at this point, we decided to head down to the basement, and sure enough, there was a patch of cement right where we were catching these EVPs.
Wow, I mean, how much more proof do you need? The fact the name came up, and it happened to be the mistress, and the mistress happened to be entombed underneath the house. There's no way they could have known that. That is absolutely insane.
At this point, it was out of our hands. We gave the journal to the police and let them handle the rest. Now, we weren't there when they investigated, but we did find out that we were able to solve a 6-year-old missing person case with an EVP.
And I was having a conversation with somebody the other day that said that detectives don't use the paranormal. They can't. They don't use that. Otherwise, there'd be stories all the time. Clearly, this person hasn't done their research, but that aside, there is a lot of case files where the paranormal has solved old cold cases, things like that. And this being yet another example. But now that we've got an idea of what an EVP is, the electronic voice phenomenon, we know what it is now. But how do we catch it? What kind of equipment do we need in order to catch an electronic voice phenomenon? Is there anything special, or can you walk out with a basic memo recorder and catch EVPs?
Let's talk equipment. When it comes to capturing EVPs, basically anything that records sound will work. Just some things work better than others.
So if you're an amateur paranormal researcher and would like to get into catching EVPs and doing more ghost investigation, you don't have to go out and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on fancy equipment and the top of the line recorders and all that. Just a very, very simple, basic audio recorder is all that you need.
Now, EVPs are technically a type of instrumental transcommunication, or ITC.
Admittedly, I got out of studying the ghost phenomenon for quite a few years, and I didn't touch any phenomena for about 5 years with the Mandela effect. That was all I really looked at. But that aside, I didn't really touch a lot of the paranormal phenomena in there for a while, like I said. And this ITC is a newer thing to me. When I went back about 6 months ago and maybe a year ago and started redoing this research, I found this ITC, and I had never heard of ITC, of course, and had no idea what it was. And the more I got to looking into it, the more impressed I was that they've really brought this thing down to more of a more focused science.
ITC is defined as communication with non-physical entities through electronic devices. But I'm going to focus on EVPs here and not delve into the entirety of ITC itself.
Okay, so I'm going to go on a little bit of a rant here. There's a channel on YouTube called Huff Paranormal, and he uses what's called a spirit box, and he's not the only one, don't get me wrong. He built his own, and I think he's got a pretty good version. Mind you, I don't trust his information, but that's a whole nother bag of worms. But what I want to get to is the fact that these ITC devices, so the problem that I have with these, you've got your output, you've got, your audio output, you've got, usually there's a couple crystals on these things, or you can buy just a very basic one, a handheld one. But my problem is that what it does to get the audio is it scans all the different radio stations continuously, just always scanning, and stops when it picks up audio, and that's it. So you can see why I have an issue with this. If you're trying to collect an EVP using an ITC device, this is a device, once again, that is got preloaded audio in it that the spirit can use to manipulate and talk through, opposed to just a voice recording device. These are two separate types of devices, really, truly. ITC covers a large amount, but the regular EVP recorders fall under. Anyway, my point is, if you're using an EVP recording device that is using an ITC style device in such that, it's got an input in it, and this input is coming from radio waves, direct radio input. It'd be like putting this talk show on in the background and then just turning the volume up every now and again after I ask a question and hope that the words that I get matches the question that I answered. I don't put a lot of stock into these ITC devices. Now, I think they've come really close. I think they've almost got these devices perfect. These spirit communication devices, if you will. And the only thing they need to do, and what I would accept is pure evidence from these devices, because right now I scoff at a lot of evidence coming from these ITC devices. But what I would accept is, if your input isn't just regular radio or regular talk shows, or as a matter of fact, if it isn't even English and you're getting English words out of it, you have my attention. But what I want to see is an ITC device that uses nothing but just random sounds, beeps, bleeps, donks, bumps, tones, just random sounds in the audio, just being replayed over and over. Now, if a spirit can manipulate that and still create an EVP just as easily as it does in a regular recorder, then you have my attention. But I think these ITC devices are really easy to rig. And I think they've got the science almost right. I think they've got these devices almost right. If they will change the input, if somebody will build a spirit box, if you will, and they will change the input from a radio input, or at least even an English input, to just sounds or a foreign language, and we can still pick up phenomenon, then you definitely have my attention. So if you guys want to build a box like that, definitely let me know. I would love to see these things in action. That aside, let's get back to the show before I go on another 20 minutes worth of rant. I'm sorry about that, guys. When it comes to the paranormal, I love the topic so much, I get a little uppity about it sometimes. Ladies and gentlemen, Grant Wilson.
Now, going back, Thomas Edison was quoted as saying that he had plans to build and possibly even built a device specifically designed for communicating with the dead.
And of course, we've spoken of the spirit phone on this show before. It's said that he never finished that, although it's still in question whether he actually did, of course.
He's been quoted as saying, "I have been at work for some time, building an apparatus to see if it is possible for personalities which have left this earth to communicate with us. Unfortunately, we have no evidence that he did anything more than just think about it."
Like I said, there's been no device found that is claimed to have been his. So if he did, it was buried or it was stolen after the fact.
Now, moving forward, Attila von Saleh, a photographer, was one of the first people to build equipment specifically designed for capturing EVPs in 1941, using a 78 RPM record.
Now, this I didn't know about, so this is an interesting history lesson for me.
But it wasn't until switching to a reel-to-reel tape recorder in 1956 where he felt he had achieved true success.
And what is interesting is the reel-to-reel uses magnetics opposed to bumps and dots in the record in order to create the sound.
The switch from phonograph to tape doesn't surprise me at all. You see, for me, magnetic media has always proven more effective. Now this brings up a good point.
Oh yeah, Grant? What would that be?
Should we use digital recorders or analog recorders? Which is better?
Considering what we know between the record and the magnetic tape, that is a really good question. If we change the technology again and go up another level, is that going to interrupt the ability to catch EVPs?
Well, there is a time and place for both. Personally, I prefer analog. You know, the ones with the cassette you actually stick in it and hit record. It's got... Kids won't understand, will they?
No, Grant, unfortunately, you're talking to dinosaurs like me that do remember the old cassette tapes. I bet these millennials wouldn't even know what to do with one if they found one. They'd probably look at, oh, was this for, like, Scotch tape or something? Yeah, I don't know. But it's sad. Most people don't, or most kids nowadays, don't know the old technologies like the cassette tapes. Because those were so amazing. You could record things and take them with you. I know I'm getting a little too excited about cassette tapes, but cassette tapes were the original ability to record EVP phenomenon, the electronic voice. The magnetic tape was able to pick up the differences, I even dare say, in the atmosphere that was being given off by the spirit.
That's what I try to stick to. Sadly, they're becoming harder and harder to find. And the ones you do find are either old or not fantastic quality. And it's sad that they're going away. I really feel like we're going to lose a vital investigation tool with the disappearance of magnetic media.
And I completely second that. I hope that maybe even the paranormal researchers, if nothing else, will be able to keep that alive, but I doubt it.
Now, you saw us using digital recorders on ghost hunters because it was logistically more convenient. First, we didn't have to worry about storing countless numbers of tapes. Second, the length of recording time wasn't limited by the amount of tape on a cassette. Third, we didn't need external microphones like you do with analog recorders. Fourth, it was much easier to transfer the files onto a computer for analysis. And fifth, we didn't have to ship any tapes to the production company. We could just email them the files instead. Truly convenient, especially for our scenario on ghost hunters. But that convenience came with a price, in my opinion. You see, I'm not even sure why digital recorders can capture EVPs.
Oh yeah, and why would that be, Grant?
Hear me out. They create a digital representation of the sound that was present at the time of recording, but they don't record the actual sound. Digital recording samples the sound waves at regular intervals, rather than just capturing the sound waves directly from the microphone. It's like comparing an incandescent light to a strobe light. A strobe light can flash so fast that it appears that it's constantly on, but it's only the illusion of it being constantly on. Only an incandescent light is actually on the whole time. If you compare an analog wave to the actual sound wave, it's going to look exactly the same. If you compare a digital wave to an actual sound wave, it's going to look jagged and broken up instead. That means less data. That means less accuracy.
That would mean that spirit is literally manipulating the device itself in order to create the sound. And that's always been a question amongst ghost researchers and spirit researching, is whether or not the ghosts are manipulating the device or they're just speaking and using an energy to push through and be heard on the device. But if they're being picked up on digital recorders like that, and my same theory about the ITC spirit boxes, and even if you just use white noise, I keep thinking about this, even if you just use white noise as the input, that would work, but it's the same deal. The fact that the spirit has to manipulate the audio in order to be able to speak in this realm, I think digital recorders actually may suggest that that is exactly what's going on. It's a manipulation opposed to just like I'm doing right now, sitting here and talking to you and you can hear it.
Now, the analog recorders record on magnetic media. Magnetic media means typically tapes. Sometimes they're big, sometimes they're small. Now, the funny thing about magnetic media is that not only does it record sound when you press record, it's also prone to imprinting, even when it's not in a recorder. Yes, unlike digital, with analog, you can capture EVPs without even having the tape in a recorder.
And once again, I think this points to the evidence that spirit is able to manipulate magnetic waves, at least to some degree, and able to manipulate the media in order to be heard, opposed to just, well, like I said, the regular sound waves. It's like it's a whole different media crossing realms.
Crazy. Which begs the question, are EVPs even recorded at all? Or are they imprinted while we record? Or both?
And that actually is a really good question, and it goes back to, once again, the main discussion that's been going on in spirit research for a long time is how does spirit effectively use audio devices and magnetic audio devices, magnetic media of some type, in order to communicate.
I often leave a blank cassette in a client's home while I investigate. After leaving it there for sometimes months, I would pop it in a tape player and hear voices, even though the cassette had never been in a recording device. I get fewer voices this way, but you do get them.
Now, I find that incredibly intriguing. As a matter of fact, that's the first time I think I've ever heard of a case where the tape was just left in the home, no recording device, nothing, just left laying, and voices were heard. That's the first time I've heard of any kind of case like that, let alone the fact that it's not the first time it's happened.
I often like to use this technique in outside investigations, such as the battlefields of Gettysburg. You see, people would quickly steal an audio recorder sitting out in the open, but they're less likely to steal a cassette tape in a Ziploc bag. Not only that, but with just the cassette, there are no batteries that can run out. Now let's step it up a notch. This also works with VHS. Put a VHS tape on your pillow for a month or two, then watch it and see what you get. If you get anything, I guarantee it'll be weird.
I don't even know anybody that owns a VHS recorder anymore, let alone a VHS tape, you know? I remember VCRs, video cassette recorders, and, you know, the VHS tapes. Have you guys ever tried that? Has anybody ever slept with a VHS tape under their pillow for a couple days and then played it and see what we got? And, you know, that isn't all that strange to me. I'm going to be honest, that isn't all that weird because I've said before, as we know, the human body gives off a bioelectric signature. So if you're sleeping, there's no telling the intensity of the bioelectric signature being given off by the brain, and this could imprint to some degree on magnetic media. I don't know to what degree, but it would make sense to me that magnetic resonance coming off the body, the bioelectric resonance, would have some type of imprint on magnetic media, only to a small degree. I mean, I don't think we're creating voices just by standing next to a cassette tape. Don't get me wrong. Otherwise, cassette tapes would not work as well as they did. I was going to say do, but did, unfortunately. But yeah, I don't think we're the cause of them, but that is an interesting test. If anybody still has a VCR and a VHS tape, put a VHS tape under your pillow, blank VHS tape, for a couple weeks and then play it, and I'd love to know what you get. That's an interesting experiment. Anybody does that, please report back to me what you find out. I would love to know.
But good luck finding a VHS tape and a player to watch it on.
I know, Gran, I know.
Another strange thing that happens with magnetic media is that the EVPs themselves can change.
I'm sorry, wait, what? The EVPs can change?
Another strange thing that happens with magnetic media is that the EVPs themselves can change.
Sorry, I just wanted to hear that again to make sure I heard that right. So, Mandela effect anybody?
I can't count how many times I've captured a great EVP, gone to show it to another investigator, only to find that it changed volume, or pitch, or duration, or even changed what it was saying. And sometimes they just disappear altogether.
I'm sure he didn't have the context for it at the time that he made this, but yeah, that sounds classic Mandela effect. Some little aspect of it wrong or different or completely missing altogether, Yeah, that is classic Mandela effect.
Now keep all this in mind when using analog. The EVP you're hearing could potentially have come from anywhere along this tape's journey from manufacturer to you, not just from when you bought it.
When I was doing in the field investigations, this was an unknown issue.
Now digital recorders don't have this problem. Once you catch an EVP, you've got it. It's not going to change volume or pitch or content, and it's not going to disappear unless you delete it.
So is there any specific equipment that we should be aware of for capturing EVPs?
Now, when it comes to specific recorders to use, just about anything will do. Just know that typically you get what you pay for. Do your research and find out which recorder is best for you, your specific techniques, and of course, your budget. For analog, I recommend considering the following features. Something with an external microphone port. When using an analog recorder, be sure to use an external microphone, or else you'll pick up the grinding sound of the gears that are moving the tape itself.
You know what grinds my gears? Picking up the sound of grinding gears in a cassette tape.
Something that uses larger cassettes. Small cassettes are fine, but the larger ones are usually higher quality, easier to find, and record for longer. Oh, and always use a new cassette. You don't want an old recording bleeding through the new one.
Very wise advice indeed. I don't ever suggest recording over anything when trying to catch an EVP.
If you can, only record on one side of the cassette. This will prevent audio from bleeding through from the other side of the cassette.
Yet again, another trick that we were unaware of when I was doing field research, but a really great piece of information to keep in mind just the same.
Something with playback speed control. Analog recorders typically don't have a very good time-stamping feature. Being able to listen as you fast forward will aid immensely in finding your EVPs again. Plus, you can slow down the playback of an EVP using this feature. Very handy.
Okay, Grant, so say I decided to get a digital recorder instead. What kind of qualities should I look for in the digital recorder?
Now, for digital, I recommend considering the following features. Something with a built-in connection to a computer, like a USB, for instance. This just makes the whole transfer process easier, but make sure that the recorder's software, if any, is compatible with your computer's operating system.
Yeah, you would think that would be common sense, but you would be surprised. So definitely a good piece of advice. Make sure all of your equipment is compatible with each other.
Something with a large storage capacity. The larger the storage capacity, the longer it can record without you actually being there. Something with a hold button. This is so that you don't accidentally turn it off or delete a file while you're investigating or while it's banging around in your bag. Something with easy navigation. Sometimes finding the file you just recorded can be harder than bullseyeing womp brats with your T16 back home.
Which is no easy feat, I can assure you.
If you can, something with an omnidirectional microphone. This will help you capture sounds from any direction.
And I had a buddy, you guys have heard me talk about before, Mr. Browning. He's wrote a couple books, at least one book I know, on building these type of devices, and he was specifically, when I knew him at the time, was working on a microphone that was a specific type of omnidirectional microphone in order to just pick up the spirit sounds. So I don't know if he ever made it through with that. I would definitely love to get a hold of him again. If you're listening to this, Robert, hit me up, buddy. I would love to know how far you made it with that microphone.
Now, this brings me to the elephant in the room. The one recorder I have to specifically talk about. The Panasonic DR60. No, I don't actually own one. Here's why. The Panasonic DR60 is a recorder made famous for its uncanny ability to capture EVPs. I mean, like every time you turn the dang thing on. Every time. Even for just like 5 seconds.
That right there would raise red flags with me, left, right, and center. That is the last piece of equipment that I would want as a paranormal investigator, because I couldn't trust the data.
With that type of track record, naturally everybody in the ghost hunting community wants one. Gotta have one. There's just one problem. They don't make them anymore.
Which, in my opinion's a good thing. Yeah, like he said, everybody in the ghost hunting community wanted one because, well, anybody could catch an EVP then. Just turn the thing on and you caught one. But that was the problem. You can't just turn an EVP or turn a recorder on and catch an EVP anytime, every single time. It doesn't work like that.
So investigators are scrambling to get their hands on one like it's Black Friday. They originally cost about $20 back in 1998 when they first came out, but now they're selling for hundreds, even thousands of dollars. It's insane. So what people are actually getting for all their hard-earned money is still a $20 tape recorder from 1998.
Now, you remember earlier, Grant said when it comes to these devices, you get what you pay for, and I can verify that is true. You get what you pay for. The cheaper quality of the device, the less quality of the device you're going to get. This was a $20 tape recorder in 98. That was cheap even for 98.
The recording quality is so low that it continually produces false positives. It's very difficult to even make out what you said, what you intentionally recorded. Because the recording quality is so low, the supposed EVPs it captures are typically loud and aggressive barking sounds. Maybe it's because they're demons. Oh.
It's demons, they're everywhere, they're gonna get us, they're everywhere, we're surrounded. Just kidding.
These gravelly sounds are very easy to misinterpret as voices, thanks to the psychological phenomenon known as pareidolia.
And oh yes, audio pareidolia is definitely a thing.
Basically, our mind's ability to find familiar patterns in complex stimuli when no real pattern actually exists. Now, this doesn't mean that the DR60 is incapable of capturing EVPs. Some of my closest friends and peers in the field use it to their success. It's just, for me, why use a tool with such high potential for contamination and misdirection when there are far better tools readily available and for much cheaper?
Which goes back to what I was saying a moment ago, is I could never trust the data coming out of this recorder, so there's no way I would ever use it to begin with.
I'd be glad to have just one solid, helpful EVP a year over thousands of questionable ones.
And that statement, I fully agree with.
I'm gonna get on a tiny little soapbox here for a minute. Bear with me. In my opinion, the DR60 exacerbates a growing problem in the field. I'll do my best to explain it. Increasingly, investigators are relying on devices to give them something, anything, any kind of feedback, constantly. They would rather get more feedback that makes less sense than less feedback that makes more sense. It seems like they don't feel they're making any progress unless something is beeping or lighting up or spitting out a word. It's like they constantly need something to react to, even if they aren't sure what the device itself is reacting to. They're constantly thirsting for something that will give them what they're hoping to get, whether it's real or not.
Which can be extremely dangerous, especially when it comes to validation in this field.
It's a real problem. I'm always leery of paranormal investigation equipment that is able to consistently produce exactly what I want it to. One thing I've learned with all my experience is, if it happens regularly, chances are it's not paranormal.
And I'm going to go ahead and jump up on my soapbox here for a moment one more time and go on just a little bit more of a rant. So one issue that I have found amongst paranormal investigation is the fact that most all, if not all of the equipment that we use is electronic equipment, which means it's giving off a magnetic signal into the environment. Now, I would argue that sometimes some equipment is picking up the signal of the other equipment that you're carrying with you. The only way that I see around something like this would be to put the other equipment in some type of a Faraday cage style holder while it's not in use. And you can get these things to put on your belt. It's not like it's got to be a Faraday cage the size of a car or something, but just a Faraday cage that you could put your device in when it's not in use. That way there's no electronic feedback into the environment that would be picked up by, say, something that's meant to pick up magnetic and electronic feedback. And you could literally be chasing yourself around the house for hours thinking you're chasing something else. So definitely be very, very careful when doing research like this, and try to take into account all of the magnetics and everything of the environment, because as a good paranormal researcher, the first thing you do is you want to rule out any logical reason. If there's fans, if there's industrial fans that could be creating extremely low frequency waves, if there's any other thing in the environment that could cause any kind of interference whatsoever, that has to be ruled out before any paranormal situation is called into question, or is called to be a paranormal situation. If you can no longer use logic to rule out everything around and there's still something going on, then when all other options have been exhausted, whatever's left, no matter how unknown or how strange, must be the truth. Yes, I butchered that quote. I'm very well aware of that. But now that I've went on my little rant once again, I appreciate you guys for bearing with me on that. Grant, do you have anything else on devices for EVPs before we go to break?
Digital or analog voice recorders aren't the only devices capable of capturing EVPs.
Okay, you've got my attention. What other devices could be useful for catching an EVP then?
The audio recorder on your cell phone is always an option. It's not the best piece of equipment, but it's portable as heck, has decent storage, and can transfer files to a computer with ease.
And again, you've got the quality, the better the cell phone, the better the quality of the audio recorder. But I've always had pretty good luck with just a regular cell phone recorder. I've never really had to do much more than that. Like if I record someone on a cell phone, I can usually use it at the quality that it's at, so that's not a bad idea.
And don't forget about your video cameras. A common mistake made by investigators is to not take into account EVPs when reviewing their video. Even if you're using a video-only DVR system, I recommend pairing audio recorders with each of your cameras. It helps tell a more complete story for both audio and video during evidence review.
So, Grant, do you have any suggestions or any favorite types that you would suggest that we use in the paranormal investigation then?
Well, I think it's clear that I prefer analog voice recorders.
As do I, Grant. And I know I've went on a heck of a soapbox so far, but it really is important information. If we're going to do this, if we're going to be validated as real, as legit, the evidence and information we put forward accepted as such, then we need to be able to prove the evidence is solid before going any further. And speaking of going further, ladies and gentlemen, it is getting to the top of the hour, so we need to go ahead and take a network break right here, and we'll be right back with the second half of the Dark Wolf's Den show right after these messages. Don't you touch that dial.
We gotta stoke the fires and run off the men in black. Don't touch that dial. We'll be right back.
Sex in the city? Nope. Interview with a vampire? Nope. If you build it, they will come? Febreze? Tweeze in the middle? Wrong again. Depends. Nope. Welcome to the Twilight Zone, my friends. A phenomenon known as the Mandela Effect. You may have heard of it. You may want to not neglect. Unbecoming, awake, and spiritually inclined. So sit back, relax, while I blow your mind. Take the thumb off the cell, stop following the sheep. Down the rabbit hole we go. Are you ready for that leap? The Zapruder film, #JFK. I looked at the footage and I said, what the hey? How come there are 6 people in that dang car? Stretch limo, for me, this was all too bizarre. A glass behind the driver, no way, Jose. I remember in the car, my mind was in total disarray. Trying to make sense of what I was seeing, what I was witnessing. Didn't connect with my inner being. A second woman in the car for me was only the first lady. Do you smell what the rock is cooking? All this seemed kinda shady. Berenstein Bears. Nope. Shazam? Sinbad? Not in this reality. Good lord. An awakening. Was it all a revelation? The naysayers and skeptics call it confabulation. They say we misremembered and call us bat crazy. Did you smoke a doob? Maybe that's why it's a little bit hazy. Unless you experience it, you'll never know. But enough of that. On with this Mandela Effect flow. Mandela Effect in the house. What in the world happened to Ed McMahon? In this reality, Publishers Clearinghouse was not a fan. Never the spokesperson, but we remember it clear as day. McMahon holding that check while the winner yelled out, "Yay!" American Family Publishers, never heard of them until now. This Mandela effect has me raising the people's eyebrow. So many theories on what it could be. Have you ever heard of CERN and the LHC? Luke, I am your father. Nope. Sally Fields? Nope, wrong again. That stands for the Large Hadron Collider. I thought I would mention. You know, the machine that opens up portals into different dimensions? You're probably thinking that this is all science fiction, but you gotta think outside the box and have no restrictions. Alternate realities and parallel dimensions. Okay, I get some of your apprehensions. Could this all be a spiritual evolution? Cause the human race has grown tired of this toxic pollution. Mandela effect in the house. No, you're not going crazy. Some people, they just don't understand. That's just the way it is. You know? Stay strong, my friends. That's just the way it is. Dolly has no braces? Are you serious? Good lord. Joel Osteen. Oh wait, Joel Osteen. So what the heck happened to the owl? Oh my gosh. Oh, this is definitely the Twilight Zone. This is crazy.
Anyhow, Juanito 1975 with perhaps the greatest rap on YouTube. Juanito 1975 is going to be a guest this weekend. I'll tell you about that in just a moment. But first, are you enjoying tonight's look at Electric Voice Phenomenon? If you've enjoyed the Dark Wolf's Den show and this look at EVPs and have not done so already, please make sure to thumb up that video, hit that subscribe button, and ring that bell. You'll get our notifications every time we go live. Jerry Hicks in the Dark Wolf's Den kicks off the weekends right here at the Ripon Rabbit Hole every Wednesday and Thursday nights, starting at 7 p.m. Pacific, 9 Central. I'll be back again tomorrow night, Friday, November 20th, starting at 7 p.m. Pacific, 9 Central, for a look at right versus wrongs. That's right. What are our rights? What perhaps are our wrongs? Is there a right way to do wrong? Join me tomorrow night and find out. Then Saturday night, we'll dive through the rabbit hole of attention deficit together. It's going to be a lot of fun if you can pay attention. We're going to explore exactly how we deprive our own selves of attention. More importantly, how we can harness and utilize techniques that allow us to focus more clearly in our day-to-day lives. That's Saturday night, November 21st, and then we'll end out the weekend November 20th.
In the back streets of the city, he would shuffle, while spinning on his heels and chewing beef. He'd promise her he'd be a vegetarian, but he could not control his lust for meat. Some say she left the streets for greater glory, but others said that she was big with child. Whatever was the truth, it did not matter. He would hunt her down and cut her with his smile. Last time he was seen was by the pawn shop. He traded 2 gold teeth for a sack of corn, and he would plant it on the outskirts of the city as a warning that he would someday return. He said he never found her and he's still looking. It is said he searches rivers for some sign, but the truth is that he caught her down in
November, is it back? That is so weird. I have no idea. Perhaps a technical EVP glitch. Juanito, Sunday night. With 3D worlds. Oh my goodness. Back to EVPs. with Jerry Hicks.
If you were meant to be controlled, you would have come with a remote, but you didn't. And that's why you listen to the Dark Wolf's Den Show. Now, here is your host, Jerry Hicks.
That's right, I am Jerry Hicks, also known as the Dark Wolf, and welcome back to the second half of the Dark Wolf's Den Show. Whether you're on the edge of reality, the edge of the galaxy, or the edge of your seat, we're glad you chose us to be right there with you. Ladies and gentlemen, it is Thursday, November 19th, 2020, and if you're just joining us tonight, welcome. We are talking about electronic voice phenomenon, or EVP. That's right. In the first half, we've heard from Grant Wilson. You guys might know the name from the show Ghost Adventures, and he was telling us about the different equipment that we need to use to capture EVPs, as well as what EVPs are in a basic rundown. So now we've got the idea. Now we know what they are. We've got our equipment. We're ready to go out on the scene. We're ready to collect some electronic voice phenomenon data, right? So is there any particular styles or anything we need to know while we're investigating in order to do this correctly, or in order to catch these EVPs?
The act of collecting EVPs can really be done however you wish, but here are the two main techniques that I use. The first style is called active EVP. Active EVP is when you try to engage in an active conversation with an entity. Essentially, you press record, ask a question, wait a few seconds for a reply, then stop recording and immediately review what you just recorded.
This is your classic collection style. This is what we did most of the time.
For example, I hit record. Who is the best investigator out there? Hit stop, instantly rewind, and let's see if we catch a voice. Who is the best investigator out there? John Zaffis. Huh.
Guess that wasn't the answer he was expecting.
Fair enough. This can be beneficial because you're gathering information as you go. Information that can be useful toward having a more meaningful conversation with the entity. Good, solid, active EVP sessions are rare though. I only recommend this style of EVP collection when you've created a good rapport with an entity, which usually takes just as much time, if not longer, than it would take to build that rapport with a living person. Otherwise, this style doesn't have as much chance for success.
Which is another point that is important to keep in mind. Remember, when you're talking to ghosts or spirits, they're just humans without flesh. That's it. They're the same consciousness, the same personality, the same person that they were in life. They just don't have the physical flesh body like we do. So building a rapport is, like he said, takes just as long as with a regular person, because that's exactly what they are. And I can tell you from personal experience, he's right. There is a rarity in catching EVPs on a first session going in somewhere, like using that particular style of just asking the question and hoping for an answer, because most of the time you won't originally get anything on a first investigation.
One of the cons of this style is that you're not constantly recording. Every time you stop recording to rewind and listen for an answer, you may be missing more EVPs because you aren't recording. This is easy to overcome though, by simply having a second recorder going that records the entire endeavor without stopping.
Once again, if you have multiple equipment running, I would definitely suggest at least one of them being a Faraday cage type device.
Now the second style is called passive EVP. Passive EVP is what you saw us doing a lot on Ghost Hunters. This consists of letting the recorder run as you move through the following phases. The first phase is simply to turn the recorder on, record the location, the number and gender of investigators present, as well as the date and time. Then you want to quickly move into the first room you're investigating without saying anything. Oftentimes you'll stumble upon a conversation already in progress.
So now that there's a record of everybody involved in the investigation, you continue on.
The second phase is you want to ask pointed questions. The point of this phase is you want to ask specific questions in an attempt to get intelligent answers from the entity. For example, if I ask, "What's your name?" and I get the response, 99.9 all rock all day, chances are I'm getting some kind of contamination. But if the response to "What is your name?" is "Dead Uncle Fred," well, then I know I don't want to talk to him. Now, if I ask the entity, do you like tater tots? And I get the response, no, well then I know I'm dealing with something inhuman. Probably negative. The whole point is, if I get answers that match the questions I'm asking, that adds a complete other layer of validation.
Especially if it's a question that is validated by something in history or some research that you already have done about the location of the property, and the answer validates the information that you already have.
The third phase is to talk amongst yourselves. After all those pointed questions, it's possible that the entities feel like they were just interrogated. What's your name? How old are you? When did you die? What are the winning lottery numbers? What are the winning lottery numbers? If you don't give me those winning lottery numbers, I'm gonna leave.
Once again, we must keep in mind, just because it's in a spirit form doesn't make it any less the consciousness that it was in the human meat bag, if you will. So yeah, it would feel like an interrogation, wouldn't it? You're just there to ask me questions and mess with me instead of really trying to help me as a spirit, because I'm sure they feel pretty lost over there. At least I would imagine. I don't know. I've not had a trip over there and come back to report anything, and I don't know anybody who's reported to me, so this is all we've really got to go on.
Talking amongst yourself seems to take the pressure off the entities. Now feel free to talk about anything you like. During this casual style of conversation, you may inadvertently talk about a subject that is of particular interest to the entity, and they can't help but chime in.
And just like with a human, if you create that comfortable environment of conversation, hopefully they would join the conversation, or at least attempt to, and hope that they are heard.
For example, if I said, Disney World is the best. What's your favorite ride there?
It's a small world.
So be careful not to skip over these casual conversations. Most of the best EVPs I've ever caught have been caught during this phase. Remember, the entities don't turn on when you hit record and turn off when you hit stop. And they most certainly don't shut off when you stop asking questions of them. So when you're doing evidence review, just because you're listening to a part that wasn't targeted questioning doesn't mean it's not worth listening to.
Which is another really valid point. You might catch stuff in times when you didn't expect to catch things, so always be aware of your analysis of investigation. We'll go over investigation analysis here in just a little while towards the end, but so let's say we decided to choose our style. We chose our vocal style. We're going to talk to the spirits. Even though it doesn't work as much, we're going to talk to the spirits. Is there anything we should know about how to talk to entities?
This, for me, is the most important aspect of doing an EVP session. As paranormal investigators, we're basically in the business of interdimensional customer service.
I would have never thought of it like that. I guess I would be just cut out for it then, because my mortal job, if you will, for many years has been customer service. And yet again, I find myself in a customer service thing here because I'm here to serve you guys. You're my customers, and I'm glad to provide the service of information. So yeah, customer service to the entities. Never would have thought about it like that.
While we do encounter other types of hauntings, typically we're dealing with intelligent human entities. And the most important thing to remember when dealing with intelligent human entities is that they're just that, human.
And that is a point that I cannot drill home enough on this episode.
And their behavior covers the same spectrum as us living folks. Some aren't the brightest bulbs, and some are just plain jerks. Just like living people. But most are good.
We're the same person on the other side that we are here, so if you're a good-hearted good person, you're probably going to remain that way. If you're a jokester or a prankster or a bad person, I'm just going to leave it at that, then that's probably the way you're going to remain on the other side. Your personality is going to be intact from everything that we've seen across all of the evidence.
I mean, I could go to, say, the grocery store. Pick up some tater tots, of course.
Am I the only one that thinks he's got a serious tater tot fetish that he should probably talk to somebody about?
And interact with several people along the way without incident. This is usually how it goes when we interact with human entities. However, there is a time and place to be stern as long as you clean up the mess afterwards. But most people respond best to respect, thoughtfulness, and kindness. Who knew?
You can catch a whole lot more flies with honey than you can with vinegar.
I find it best to try to create a relationship of trust, peace, and fun. Fun, you say? In a paranormal investigation? But it's supposed to be dark and scary and brooding. Actually, it's not. Light, fun conversation leads to comfort. Comfort equals cooperation, and cooperation means results. Amazingly, this works with the living and the dead. Give it a shot.
And once again, as we spoke of earlier, if you create that environment, that calm environment of conversation, and you're coming into someone's home a lot of time, a home they lived in for most, if not all, of their life. And if you come in acting respectful and, having conversation and talking and being respectful to the entity, you're going to have a lot better chance of getting an interaction than if you come in being not so nice, and let's put it at that.
Now, if someone is actually out and about doing paranormal investigation, they have to at least be open to the idea that there may be an unseen entity there in the room with them. So let's not pretend they aren't. Let's talk to them as if they actually might be in the room with us.
I got a cousin listening. Shout out to you, James. I appreciate you, brother. Cousin, actually. But seriously, though. He recently has lost someone very close to him, and I personally, as you guys know, the day before we started the first episode of this show, lost my best friend also, so it's comforting to know that they're still there, and I can't count the times, and I'm pretty sure my cousin can also agree, and anybody out there who has lost someone, I'm sure you guys do this too. Do you talk to the air because you feel they're there? I do. I do it all the time. I'm not even gonna lie about it. If I feel that there's an energy there that I feel is most likely her, my best friend, then yeah, I talk to the air. I talk to the air all the time, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. And it's comforting to know that most likely I am talking to something. It might not be the entity I think it is. It might be, but it always is comforting to know or think that they might be there listening in the same room.
To accomplish this, I encourage you try the following. Be considerate. Allow the entities about 3 times as long as it would take a living person to answer the question. Think of it less as a conversation and more like you're writing a letter to a pen pal. I always like to offer as much information to the entity as I'm expecting from the entity. If I want to know how many kids they have, I will first tell them how many kids I have. For example, I might say, I have a lovely wife and 3 boys. Do you have a family? It's simply how you build trust.
And I would also, once again, point out that these tips work very well in real life, too.
Next, speak to them in the present tense. This is a hard habit for many investigators to break. They talk to the entities as if they don't exist anymore. This can be terribly confusing for them, especially if we're in there with the belief that they're actually in the room with us. How awkward would it be if I came up to you and asked, did you have brown hair? Were you married when you were alive? Did you like tater tots? It's weird, right? We want to avoid confusion in order to build that relationship of trust with the entity. Instead, say, do you have brown hair? Are you married? Do you like tater tots? The rhetorical question, I guess.
Again, he's got a serious tater tot fetish. But if you're speaking to someone in real time, if I'm talking to you, I'm not going to be talking in past tense, did this, did that. It's very much, keep in mind, if we're in the mindset that they're literally in the room with us, they exist, they are an entity, they are a thing, if you will. And not was a thing, not was an entity, they still are. So, I know that doesn't make a lot of sense to some of you, but even though they may look misty to us, I have this theory that on that side, they're just as solid and normal as we are. It's just the interactability is a little different. But when on an investigation, talk in real time, in present. How are you? Do you live here? Do this, or how is that? Not how was or did you look like, as Grant was saying, talk in real time. As if you were talking to a person, as if I'm sitting talking in the backstage lounge to AJ or my life or anybody. It would be just the same when having a conversation with an entity.
We continually expect them to manipulate the equipment in the room with us in the present tense, yet we think of them and talk to them as if they're in the past tense. That's really odd.
And may also minimize the amount of EVP evidence that is acquired.
Next, speak to their time period. Try to get a sense of what time period these entities may have lived in, and keep your speech as timeless as possible. For example, don't say, "Yo dog, what's up?" Anyone from like the 1990s back would have no idea what you're talking about. Not that anyone still knows what you're talking about. Instead say, "How are you?" Don't overdo it either and say, "How doth thou farest?" Yes? As modern entities might not grasp that one. If you have to, favor the past in your language, as subsequent generations are usually aware of the way people used to talk. But previous generations have no idea how people are going to talk in the future.
Yet another great tip. Use timeless, regular speech. Not a lot of slang, not a lot of craziness or anything like that. Just regular, modern, I wouldn't even say modern, just general speech. Because that is what the entity most likely will have understood regardless of their time period, is general conversation. And even at worst, they'll have a better understanding of what's going on than, once again, the example he used, yo, dog, what's up? They may not really comprehend very little, if any, of that.
The next should be a given. Speak to them in their language. I always found it odd that when people were trying to contact an Italian entity, for instance, decide to speak English? Newsflash, not everybody speaks English. Would you really do this to a living person? Would you really try to speak to them in a language they don't understand? Guys, it's simple. Find someone who can speak to the entity in their language or use translation software. It's really easy to find these days. You have to be willing to meet them on their turf, or at least halfway. Now, I am aware of the theory that they're able to just sense or detect our intentions despite the language barrier. While that is a beautiful concept, it's not one I found to be true based on my experience.
And again, we must treat these as if we're talking to a person in a living meat suit, if you will, because that's all they are. They just don't have the locks of the body that we have. So we have to talk to these entities as if they were us. No different at all. For instance, I'm not going to go up to a Spanish person and start speaking Italian. I'm not going to go up to an Italian and start speaking German. And I'm not going to go up to a German and start speaking American. They're not going to understand me. There's going to be a serious language barrier there. And yes, I may get a response and may get a reply, but it's not going to be very good. And I don't think an entity or a spirit, if they have to use energy to manipulate this world somehow, is going to waste their energy on answering a language that they don't even understand to begin with.
I've captured a number of EVPs in different languages, from Polish to Algonquin. I needed a translator to understand what they were saying, so I have to assume that the entities need a translator to understand what I'm saying.
I like the fact that he mentions translation software. Because if you can just catch an EVP, maybe a quiet room EVP, at least you can do a translation and at least have some idea of what is being said on the EVP. And it goes back to my rant about the IT seed and spirit box devices. The fact that if you're using another language and you're trying to catch English, and they're able to manipulate the device into saying English, or just using sounds, and they're able to create language, that is more impressive than, the way they're doing it right now. But I don't want to get back in that soapbox, because I will definitely rant for another couple minutes, and I don't want to do that. But the point here is, speak to them in their own language. And if you can't, at least use some type of translation device to be able to speak to them in their language.
Next, be honest. This one drives me nuts. Be honest with the entities. It's not hard. Be crystal clear about your motivation for contacting them.
As a personality, again, just on the other side of the veil, they would be no happier about being lied to than you would be or I would be, I would imagine.
You can't expect them to trust you if you're hiding something. And please, for the love of all that's holy, do not make promises you can't keep just to get a reaction. Please. It's rude and one of my biggest pet peeves in the field.
Plus, it really doesn't say a lot to your moral character either.
They aren't trick ponies waiting for you to show up so they can do backflips for you. It's give and take, not just take.
And this reminds me of something my buddy Mr. Browning said, and I've always valued and treasured, and that's that he hated the word ghost hunting. He's not here to hunt a ghost, just like hunting a deer or hunting a rabbit or a squirrel. He wasn't ghost hunting. That was just a rude term in his opinion. He was there to investigate the entity that is on the premises. He's just like Grant says, it's about knowing the ghost and getting to know the entity and possibly helping them to cross to the next path. But definitely not hunting. And that word in itself has such connotation because that's what people do. They go out hunting for a ghost. Like Grant just said, a one-trick pony that they expect to do a trick for them. That's not it. These are people. These are regular people just like you, me, and everyone else. Again, they just don't have the locks of the human suit keeping them locked into this realm. So you want to treat these people with the same respect that you would treat anyone else.
Now, occasionally there will be a time where you have to provoke or put your foot down. Usually when a client or their child are being pestered. And that's fine to do. That's how you would treat a living person that is exhibiting the same behavior. But you have to follow through. You have to clean up. You can't just egg the entity on and then leave the home and the client with an agitated entity.
That definitely does not ever end well. You don't want to just go in and rile the spirit up and leave. You're doing nobody any favors, including yourself.
Oh, and for heaven's sakes, don't ever say, if you give us a sign of your presence, we'll leave. It's a lose-lose situation. Either they won't give you a sign, or they will, and you'll have to make good on your word and leave right as the activity starts. Just don't do it.
Yeah, that definitely sounds like setting yourself up for failure, and if you don't leave and prove to be a liar, you're definitely not going to have any better luck either, so...
Most importantly, keep it positive, light, and fun. Most people naturally want to join in on a fun, relatable conversation, rather than an interrogation on death, dying, and the afterlife. Yes, it's perfectly fine to tease each other and laugh during an investigation. Shocking, I know. Shocking. Scandalous. Yes, scandalous. It seems that many of the entities we speak with don't realize that they're dead.
And this is something else that has come up so often in the research. The idea that they may not have any idea that they are dead. So that suggests a couple things about the world that they're in. They're either in the same world we're in, just again without the meat suit, or whatever world they're in is absolutely identical to the one that they came from, because clearly if they don't know they're dead, they don't see anything as different or wrong. So it is very likely that they're in the exact same realm, if you will, that we are, just without the physical meat suit around them in order to be able to be interacted with. The locks, if you will, have been taken off, to quote my buddy Browning again.
Talking about their death could easily confuse them. Remember, our goal is to try to connect with them, not cause them pain.
As a regular human being, if somebody come up to you and flat out told you, hey, you're dead, this is death, you never knew it, but you're actually dead, you would be really confused, especially if you believed this person, right? At least, the very least, you would be quite incredulous. And if an entity doesn't know they're dead, you telling them they're dead is not doing either of you any favors, because you could very well send them into the equivalent of shock. Just as well as a person on this side losing their mind if they think they have died, or even multi-dimensional jumping. And yes, there are those that believe that, and I don't blame them, honestly, if you look at the Mandela effect. But I'm getting off topic. Anyway, the point is, there are those that believe that on either side. So to ruin one's belief system, I don't care if it's an entity or a living meatbag human, to ruin that belief system is not going to help you or the entity out at all in first. Trying to start a rapport and gain a conversation with this entity. Starting out with, "You're dead, how did you die?" probably isn't a good way to open the floodgates of friendship, right?
In my experience, every time I have a great interaction with a supposed intelligent human entity, and I mention their death or dying, the conversation ends immediately. Now, could it be due to the mental whiplash of them realizing that they're not alive anymore? Could it be because there's something preventing them from speaking about it? I don't know, but what I do know is that it ends that stream of communication, and that's counterproductive.
Again, like I was just saying a moment ago, you want to treat these entities as if they are you, me, and anyone else, because that's exactly what they are. And if you give them the shock of "you're dead," well, you probably aren't going to get anything but a surprised entity. I don't think they're stopped from telling us that information. I really don't. I think it's to the point that they probably don't realize it until the moment they're told, and then it, puts together the different things they've noticed thus far, and yeah, that could send even you or me into a mental breakdown, let alone an entity who actually is past.
So the overlying message here is, stop thinking of them as it, and start thinking of them as the people you might meet in any given daily situation. Other than understanding their unique situation, that of not being alive anymore, treat them as you would any other person. And in dealing with other people, being respectful, polite, honest, and engaging goes a lot further than commanding them.
Like I said a moment ago, you catch a whole lot more flies with honey than you do with vinegar. You're going to get a whole lot more conversation for being nice than you are from being not so nice. And again, this can be really good, what's the word I'm looking for, advice, even for those in the living realm especially. You're not going to have as good a luck with anybody wanting to interact with you if you're being mean and rude to people, opposed to if you're being nice and open-minded and welcoming to people. It's going to be a totally different take on how people interact with you, or whether they even want to, for that matter.
Now, this is something I'm very passionate about, guys. And unfortunately, it's a mentality that's rapidly decreasing in the field. As more and more people get engaged in paranormal investigation and ghost hunting, it seems like there's less and less respect for the entities themselves. It's a viewpoint we simply can't afford to lose. It bothers me to see people treating entities, who are just other people, so poorly and for such selfish reasons. Now, I don't care how you investigate the paranormal. Just please don't hurt people along the way, be they living or dead. Learn how to deal with living people, and you'll be a pro at handling the dead.
And that, Mr. Grant, I don't think could have been said better any other way. All right, guys, so we've got our equipment. We've learned how to use it. We've went on an investigation. We've collected all our evidence. Now there's only one step left. There's the analysis phase. And we're going to hear just a little bit about that before we close out the show. Wow, can you guys believe it's been an hour and a half already? Absolutely mind-boggling. Time goes so fast when you're having fun, and I have a blast with you guys. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, Grant Wilson.
Time to analyze. Now, to be honest, you could simply hold the recorder up to your ear and listen to it, and if the EVP is clear enough, you're good to go. But that's typically not the case.
As a matter of fact, that is an extreme rarity. That may happen once or twice in an investigator's entire career.
Here are some tips on how to take it to the next level. First off, put that sucker on a computer. This will allow you to store the EVP and back it up so you don't lose it. It'll also make it much easier for you to share that EVP with other people to get a second opinion on what it might be saying and the implications of what it might be saying. Having it on the computer will also make it much easier to analyze it. Now, this is normally an easy process when it comes to digital recorders. Simply plug the USB in and copy the file onto your computer. With analog, it's a little bit trickier. You're gonna need one of these babies. It's a auxiliary cord, and it's got a stereo headphone jack on each end. Simply plug one end into the headphone jack of your analog recorder and the other end into your mic input on your computer. Then you're going to want to set the volume on your recorder to about 70%. Then on your computer, simply hit record on whatever audio recording software you use. Once that's all set, hit play on your audio recorder and let it rip. Now that you've got the file on your computer, it's going to be way easier to analyze.
So step one would be to put it onto a computer for analysis. In order to put it into your audio software and bring up the sound wave files and actually do a deep analysis of the sounds in the room, or whatever sounds were caught on the recorder.
Now, most of these audio recordings are going to be pretty long, so make sure you take frequent breaks to keep your mind sharp and focused.
A very good tip, and again, a good tip for life in general. Always try to keep your mind focused and make sure you're taking breaks when you need to, and, you know, taking care of yourself. That's number one. But when it comes to this analysis, definitely make sure you're not groggy and falling asleep and thinking you're hearing things that you're not, because, you know, you really need to be sure of what's going on when you're analyzing these things. And something else about putting it in that audio software is you can take what looks like a flat line, turn the volume way up on it in the software, and find things there that you didn't know were there without turning it up. Because if it's no audio, it's going to be a flat line all the way across. But if there was something in there, it's going to create a bump once you turn up the gain and volume in your audio software. It's going to show that you picked something up that you didn't realize was there. But yeah, that's another good reason for putting it on the computer for analysis.
I also suggest not multitasking. A lot of people like to check their email or surf the internet while they're doing this, and it just makes it way too easy to lose your focus.
Once again, this stands pretty well for everything in life. Be careful multitasking, because you're not going to be as focused and as good on one particular project over another because you're splitting between multiples.
So plop yourself down in a comfortable spot, free from distractions. Throw on some good quality headphones so you can hear everything clearly in the recording. Grab yourself a notebook, a pencil, some snacks and a drink, and you're ready to go.
And stay on task. I cannot also emphasize that enough. Stay focused on what you're doing, take it seriously, and stay on task.
Once you find a potential EVP, grab that notebook and pencil, jot down the file name, time, duration, and who, if anyone, was present when it was recorded. Also take note if the EVP is unclear and requires any kind of filtering.
All very pertinent information to the investigation and analysis.
Now, when it comes to filtering an EVP, you're going to need some software. Pretty much any audio software will do. I use Adobe Audition and Pro Tools. Then again, I write and record music, so I have a reason for investing in such software.
And I can tell you, I personally use Adobe Audition, and I think it's one of the best pieces of software on the market, but it's also one of the most expensive pieces of software on the market too. However, you don't need the expensive stuff. You can use something like the free version of Audacity just to look at the audio files and do analysis on them. You don't need to have something super fancy for something like that. So don't let anyone tell you that you can't afford it, or don't let yourself think that you can't afford to do something like this. It costs too much to get into this field, because it really doesn't. You can use really cheap software and stuff for analysis, and you don't have to have the $1,000 media recorders, things like that. But it's going to cost a little bit, but I guarantee you it's not a rich man's field.
Filters aren't amazing, though.
That's true. When it comes to the free software, the filters aren't absolutely amazing, but that's a good thing, and here's why.
Because you want to avoid over-filtering your EVPs. So call now! When it comes to filtering your EVPs, less is more. I usually start by simply boosting the volume. Now, if I can't hear it clearly at that point, I'll go ahead and remove the click, hiss, and pop from the recording. There's usually a very easy to use filter that does this quickly. Now, if that doesn't make it discernible, then I usually stop at that point. Applying any further filtering usually distorts the EVP beyond recognition.
This is something else that I cannot emphasize enough in the analysis part of the program, is the fact that you need to be very, very careful when it comes to using filters. I know myself that when it comes to analyzing things like that, the only thing I ever do is turn up the gain and the volume to see if I can see something that I didn't see or hear originally. I don't do a lot of extra filtering because the more filtering you add, the worse the quality is actually going to be. You're not going to help your quality boost any by adding all these filters. As a matter of fact, you're just going to make it a worse and worse quality EVP if you continue. And you may end up with anomalies and artifacts in the audio that weren't really there just by adding these filters. So be very, very careful when you're doing analysis and adding filters and things like that, that you're not really filtering so much as maybe changing the volume, or like he said, taking out pops and hisses, or maybe raising the gain or another part of the volume, once again, just to be able to analyze the file opposed to changing the quality or style of the file itself.
One technique people like to use is called phase filtering. This takes a short sampling of the background noise and overlays it on the entire clip as a filter. This essentially cancels out the background noise from the recording. This sounds like an answer to our prayers. Amazingly convenient, right? In theory, all that should remain after removing all that background noise should be the EVP, right? Well, it's not. What you usually end up with is what sounds like a transmission from Mars or a droid with a bad motivator. Therefore, I suggest not phase filtering at all.
And again, it speaks to my point I made a moment ago. Just because you add a bunch of filters doesn't mean you increase the quality. As a matter of fact, you most likely decrease the quality.
Now, there are some subtle things you can listen for to help identify if a sound is an EVP and not from some other mundane source. There is a phenomenon I call bracketing.
And once again, I got out of ghost and spirit phenomenon research for a while, so this to me is a new concept also, so let's learn something else together, guys.
Bracketing is usually more pronounced on analog recorders than it is on digital. Shortly before and after an EVP, you may hear a small sound. It's usually a click or a small thud or a short quiet patch of static. Either way, the initial sound will always be of the same type as the closing sound. Essentially, you'll hear the opening bracket, the EVP, and then a closing bracket.
Okay, so I'm sure we all know exactly what he's referencing here. You hear the shh, and then you hear the whatever the EVP is, and then you hear the shh again, for instance. I've noticed this myself in many EVP analysis. I just never have known it to be called bracketing, but it makes sense.
If you catch brackets around an EVP, it should help you feel like you've got something a little more legit. Listen to the acoustics of the EVP. Usually the acoustics of the EVP you've captured will vary greatly from the acoustics of the investigators' voices in the room. Sometimes the EVP sounds closer to the microphone than it does the voices of the investigators. Or sometimes the room will add a slight echo to the investigators' voices, but the EVP will be devoid of that echo.
Which is another phenomenon that I find super intriguing, because it again suggests that they're able to manipulate the audio electronic devices and not using sound waves as we would traditionally know sound waves to be.
Or vice versa. Basically, if the acoustics of the EVP you captured don't match the acoustics of the room you were investigating, that voice couldn't possibly have been heard while that was recording. That adds another layer of validation.
And suggests that it truly is a real EVP and not just a environmental anomaly.
Now, on the flip side, here are a few acoustic traps to look out for. Whispering is easily confused with EVPs. I always recommend to speak just above a whisper. Kinda like this. Just above a whisper. I'm whispering now. I'm not whispering now. This allows you to talk as quietly as possible while still keeping your voice recognizable as your own.
We definitely want to make sure we're not creating any false positives during the investigation, for sure.
This is very important to remember because being able to recognize your own voice will help you avoid acoustic traps, such as sound refraction. Now, as we all know, sound travels in waves, but the direction of that sound is in 90-degree angles to those waves. Now, after a hot day, there's cool air near the ground and warm air up in the sky. Sound travels faster in warm air and slower in cool air. This causes the sound waves up high to curve because sound always travels perpendicular to the wave. This effect makes sounds that are further away sound closer than they actually are. So always be aware of this phenomenon. Get some control recordings and be suspicious of every sound you hear.
Did you guys know about this environmental phenomenon and that sound travels different in different temperatures? If you did, go ahead and put a 1 in the chat room. If you had never heard of this before and you actually learned something new, go ahead and put a 2 in the chat room. And if you just completely missed that altogether, go ahead and put a 3.
Dome ceilings present a unique problem. Be very leery of them. If two people stand in the sweet spots on opposite ends of a dome and speak at any level, it's going to sound as if they are directly next to each other. In addition to just hearing the sound coming from across the room, like a billiard ball bouncing off a pool table, that sound's going to reflect off the ceiling and down to the listener. And that's going to do that multiple times, so it's going to magnify the effect of the sound, and it'll be much louder than just hearing you from across the room. The best way to counter this is to put a second recorder on the exact opposite side of the room from any recorder you may have placed in there. This way you can validate if you've actually caught EVPs or if they're just sounds being magnified from the other side of the dome. Now, air ducts are excellent at transporting sound. I don't know how many cases I've been on where the cause for the activity was actually sound traveling through an air duct to behind a couch or a bed. Always be aware of the placement of the air ducts in a home, especially behind and underneath furniture, and especially in duplexes or apartments.
One of the first things, and I think I mentioned this earlier, as a good investigator, one of the first things you should do is look for any of these type anomalies. Know where the air ducts are. Know where the industrial fans in the building are. Know where anything in the house is that could cause these crazy sound frequencies. Like he said, sound traveling through air ducts into a wall can create some funky sounding noises. And if an investigator can rule out everything else, then whatever's left, has to be accepted.
Anyone who's investigated at all is aware of this one. Be leery of rumbling stomachs. Now, I can't count how many cheeseburger demons people have captured on investigations, all because they were too shy to tag it. Now, this is not the time to be coy. If you cough, burp, or fart, make a bodily noise, own up to it. We all do it. Part of who we are. It's biology.
Again, let's be careful not to blame false positives on ourselves. Instead of blaming it on the dog, now they're blaming it on ghosts, right?
Plus, if you happen to crack one off on an investigation, it'll lighten the mood. Just give people a heads up so they don't think there's a demon invasion, okay?
Yeah, if I start smelling rotten eggs and sulfur and somebody doesn't fess up, I may get a little worried because we do know that is classic demonic activity.
Now that you've ruled all of those out and you've filtered your EVP, it's ready to go. The very last step is the most important though. Share your EVP with at least 5 other people. Don't tell them what you hear, or that it's a little girl's voice, for example. Don't even tell them the conditions of the case.
The last thing that you want to do if you're trying to validate an EVP is prime your subject. That is not going to be helpful. What I want all the time is an independent validation. I don't want my subject to be expecting anything except for you're going to hear something, I want you to give me your opinion. That's it. I don't want to tell them what I think I heard. I don't want to prime them or suggest in any way when presenting an EVP to somebody. I just want to play a piece of audio and see what they hear. That way I get an independent analysis from them without outside influence.
Just tell them when to expect it, have them listen to it several times so they can come to their own conclusion. They need to be free to be as objective as possible. Now, if they hear the same thing as you, this will validate not only the quality of the EVP, but your ear as an audio evidence reviewer. So there you have it. Simple, right? The more you do it, the more you'll learn. Just remember to take your Tums to avoid those cheeseburger demons.
Cheeseburger demons are the absolute worst, right? But seriously, guys, be careful on investigations. Make sure you're very, very thorough. Make sure you've accounted for all options, all environmental obstacles. Once everything is accounted for and you're still able to catch an electronic voice phenomenon or EVP, then you know that you've got something real. And this is definitely, in my opinion, some of the best evidence we can find for proof of the afterlife. And as a matter of fact, if we look into it, analyze it as we've done tonight, we can see a couple clues on what the afterlife may actually look like and be like. But what do you guys think? Do you think this is real? Do you think EVPs are a real thing that people are catching on these ghost hunt investigations, these electronic voice phenomenon? Do you think that it could be magnetic anomalies on the tape? Do you think it could be magnetic anomalies on the environment or from the human body itself? Or do you think it could really be messages from the other side? In the end, ladies and gentlemen, you be the judge. We got to close it out. That's right, that's it for this episode of the Dark Wolf's Den Show for Thursday, November 19th. 2020. I hope everybody has enjoyed this extremely deep dive down the rabbit hole of EVPs. I know I have enjoyed doing it immensely for you guys, as we enjoy doing every episode. I am so thankful for you guys coming by every week and hanging out with us. Whether you're on the edge of reality, the edge of the galaxy, or the edge of your seat, we're glad you chose us to be right there with you. Ladies and gentlemen, that is it for the Dark Wolf's Den Show this week. We have no more episodes left on the air. However, our buddy AJ the Ripon Rabbit will be taking over for Friday through Sunday. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. I happen to know that on Friday night he's going to be talking about rights and wrongs. There's a very fine line sometimes that defines right and wrong, isn't there? Are you doing right? Are you doing wrong? Are you sure? Tune in Friday night to find out more. Then on Saturday night, what are we talking about again? Squirrels? Oh yeah, attention deficit disorder. That's right. Attention deficit disorder. Do you know anybody who suffers with attention deficit disorder? Or do yourself? Ooh, that's shiny. I mean, do you yourself suffer with attention deficit disorder? I don't know. I've been accused of it a time or two. What is that sound? Oh, anyway, ladies and gentlemen, tune in Saturday for attention deficit disorder. You might learn something there. And speaking of learning something, Sunday is going to be a very fun episode indeed. You might learn about 3D worlds. Ladies and gentlemen, he's going to have special guest, our buddy Juanito 1975, a good buddy of the network here. He's the one that does the Mandela Effect rap, going out to break every episode. So come in Sunday on AJ's Ripon Rabbit Hole live show, where he'll be on there discussing 3D worlds. And let me tell you guys, he is really, really talented with that. This is going to blow your mind. And it's a good thing, because that's going to round the weekend out. You're going to have a couple days to recoup before we kick it back off again on Wednesday and Thursday night with a brand new weekend here on Ripon Common Sense Radio. Speaking of Ripon Common Sense Radio, go over on riponrabbithole.com while we are off on Monday and Tuesday, and you can still find our archived episodes and all kind of fun stuff. What was that episode? What was that website again? Oh, that is the riponrabbithole.com. I'm glad you asked. That is RIPONRABBITHOLE.com. That's right. Over there, like I said, you're going to find the archived episodes of both AJ's Ripon Rabbit Hole live show, as well as the Dark Wolf's Den Show archives. So definitely check that out. Also, while you're over there, if you've got a group topic or a topic you'd like to suggest for us to do a show on, go over to the groups section, the rabbit holes, we call them over there, and drop us a line in our Dark Wolf's Den Show groups, topics, and suggestions, and we would love to hear from you guys. Also, there's all kind of other groups over there. You don't necessarily have to be over there for me. You can go over and check out the Mandela Effect group. You can check out Juanito 1975's Lucid Dreaming group. There's something for everybody over there. Speaking of everybody that I hang out with hangs out over there at the 24/7 Backstage Lounge. That's right. Make sure you come over and hang out with me if you'd like. It's absolutely free. Just go to the 24/7 Backstage Lounge, scroll halfway down the page, select the VIP entrance. When you do, it's going to ask you to okay your camera and microphone. Go ahead and hit okay. You can turn those off the moment you get in the room and just use text if you would like. We've got a couple people that do just that. Ladies and gentlemen, that's where I'm going to go here in just a couple minutes. So with that said, I can't wait for Friday through Sunday, guys, and AJ's Ripon Rabbit Hole live shows this week. These are some great topics, and it's going to be lots of fun, and we're going to learn a lot of stuff along the way, like we always do. My name is Jerry Hicks, also known as the Dark Wolf, and on behalf of Chick Mandela Effect, Michael Musco, Walt House, AJ the Ripon Rabbit, everybody that supports this show and this station, as well as everyone at Ripon Common Sense Radio. We thank you for listening, and remember always, stay awake, but dare to dream. I will see everybody tomorrow on AJ's show. How? Yeah! The weekend has begun. Good night, everybody.
I'm lost and into the dark. Some things are better left unknown. And I'll never find you here, 'cause no one's ever Oh, what a widow, a peaceful spider. When the glass is clean, she's a sneaky hider. Hide the lies and the alibis. Oh, what a sinner. Is it in her? What's the truth in this riddle? Is love really just this simple? I can't seem to find my way in this world that never stays. What a widow, a peaceful spider. When the glass is clean, she's a sneaky hider. Hide the lies and the alibis. What a sinner. Is it in her? Is this real? Just illusion? I'm lost in the wonderland of confusion. I'm lost in the wonderland of confusion. Is this real or just illusion? Manifestation or a dark delusion? Is this real or just illusion? I'm lost in a wonderland of confusion.